Hi, I'm Mayce.
And I'm Missy.
We're best friends
and business partners. And each week, we're going to bring you a quote that inspires us, and we're going to talk about it.
Join us as we break down our favorite impactful messages for leadership and share how you can apply them to lead with confidence and purpose.
Get ready for a fun and authentic journey into leadership, life, and everything in between. Well, hey, bestie.
Hey, bestie. This is going to be such a good episode. I am beyond excited.
I agree. I honestly cannot wait. So let's not.
Yeah, I say let's dive in, right? With this week's quote and this week's guest.
Okay. So here's the quote that we're going to talk about. Everyone deserves to be led well.
It is so good. It is one of my favorite quotes.
And what is even better is that today we have with us the man who coined this phrase, Mark Cole. Mark.
Welcome, Mark.
Yay, we're so excited to have you here.
Guys, we are so excited.
I'm so glad to be here. You know what? I've already told you guys this before we jumped in that I woke up early this morning, as is custom. And I looked at the day when I saw you guys and the chance to get to share with you, and then no doubt all the people that you're influencing through the podcast. I went, this is a highlight. And I've had a pretty good day. This is a highlight right here. I'm so excited to be with you guys.
Oh, well, we appreciate that so much. It's surely a highlight of our day today, too.
Yes, it is. So before we talk about this quote, let's share with our listeners, Mayce. Let's tell them who Mark is, because he's pretty special, isn't he?
He sure is. I'll let you do that.
Okay, so Mark Cole serves as the CEO of Maxwell Leadership Enterprises and has more than 25 years of leadership and team development experience, which absolutely uniquely qualifies him to have an integral role and be the champion of John C. Maxwell's legacy.
Yes.
He's committed to adding value to individual leaders and to leadership teams. Mark has experience in both the nonprofit and for-profit sectors, and he has led companies through economic challenges, growth barriers, and disconnected team dynamics.
And Missy, I will also say he is our mentor.
Yes,
but
he is.
Even more importantly than being our mentor, he is a friend.
He is, absolutely. Yeah. And I'll say a fellow Southerner, Mayce.
That's right.
I know. The cheese stands alone today. I am all by myself today.
You are by yourself with that.
If I need to, I will. If I need to, I'll make sure to do some translation if necessary.
Yes.
Or Mayce, if you feel uncomfortable, throw in a y'all every now and then, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay. So, Mark, let's talk about it. Where did this idea come to you from, where everyone deserves to be led well? I mean, we know your heart, and we truly believe in the depths of your soul that you believe this to be true. But is there a backstory? If so, will you let us in on it? What's the backstory?
Yeah, so the backstory truly, and I don't say this just because of where I am. I would say this if we were talking to a bunch of other people. The backstory is you, Missy. It's you, Mayce. It's getting to work alongside of people like you for years and years and years, and realizing that when someone is led well, they're better for it. If someone is not led well, then the challenges that all of us face becomes worse when leadership is bad. Mm-hmm. And so it was truly years and years and years and years of experiencing good leadership to where I observed that everyone deserves to be led well. There is an innate human need as well as a human expectancy that says everyone deserves to be led well. Here's where it triggered for me. I'd been running John Maxwell's organization. You guys, my goodness, I heard that bio and I went, man, I must be old. That's a lot of experience for one person. But for 25 years now, I've been on John Maxwell's team. Again, Missy, Mayce, how you guys are. We're just all teammates here. I get the right, the privilege, the responsibility to steward some high-level leadership roles in John's organization. But it all started in 2021. We were leading through what now is known as the world's greatest pandemic of our time, of my
Sure.
lifespan, COVID.
Yeah.
And we can't meet, we can't connect. And so we as a leadership team is sitting here watching political leaders, we're watching religious leaders, we're all watching this pandemic, this crisis, to reveal the leader within them, to reveal what kind of leader. You know, good times over exaggerate the effectiveness of a leader, and bad times under exaggerate the effectiveness of a leader. What I'm really saying when I say that is difficult times is really what exposes a leader, whether she or he is a good leader. We're sitting there in this setting. We're trying to figure out how do we continue serving and adding value to tens of thousands of coaches around the world, to hundreds of companies. We're sitting in this meeting, the 6 of us leadership, executive leaders of John Maxwell's company. And a friend of mine looked at us and says, why do we exist? Why don't we just shut everything down and be done?
No.
That was the question. Now, he had no idea how favorable that idea was to me right then.
Sure. Well,
It was
yeah.
a critical time, guys.
Right.
It was a critical time.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget when somebody says, because the world needs us.
Oh.
Because the world could not handle the world could not handle the darkness if our light went out.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
good.
That's true.
Wow.
John says it like this, and I am coming to the answer to the question, but John says it like this. He says he's leadership sad. What he's saying is the state of leadership is in such despair that good leadership, values-based leadership, people, men and women of value needs to step up now more than ever.
Yeah.
And it was in that setting, guys, that I went, you know what? Everyone deserves a good leader.
Oh,
I didn't
so
say
good.
at that point, everyone deserves to be led well. I said, everyone deserves a good leader. I remember when I didn't have a good leader. I remember when I did have a good leader. And oftentimes it wasn't because of me that I had a bad leader or a good leader, just the luck of the draw, the challenge of the
Yes.
situation.
Right.
I just was placed in the middle of a good or a bad leadership. But here's what I knew. With good leaders, I was better. With bad leaders, I ended up feeling worse and probably was worse. So it was from that, sitting around a leadership table at a leadership retreat, that we went, you know what? Maxwell leadership exists because everyone deserves to be led well.
Love
And
that.
now
So
the
good.
more that I've been able to say it, Missy, Mayce, the more I've been able to say that, the more true it rings every time I spend time talking about it.
Yeah. And we're excited because we're going to talk about it today even more.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So we know that the 3 of us, we know that some of our listeners as well, we know what the true definition of leadership is, right? We know that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And we've learned that from our friend and mentor, John Maxwell. But we also know that there are people out there who haven't been fortunate enough to either have a great leader or be mentored by John. They may have a different idea or a different perspective of what leadership is.
Yeah. I mean, some might think it's about a title or a position, which of course is definitely not the case. So how can someone who doesn't really look at leadership, Mark, the way the 3 of us do, the way we look at it, how can they lead well?
You know, I get asked the question a lot. What do I do with your content if I don't see myself as a leader? And my immediate response, which might be a little snarky, is, well, change your perspective. Not how will my content help you, not this, change your perspective, because everybody's a leader. Now, not everybody has the traditional sense that we learned when we learned the word leader, because we always have thought, Missy, you just said this, we've always thought leadership as a position. Right. I'm the boss, I sign the paychecks, I am a leader. Right. There's nothing further from the truth. In fact, a lot of times when people use that to define themselves as a leader, they're the furthest thing from a leader. They're a positional manager.
That's right.
Not a leader.
Right.
Yeah.
They're a dictator oftentimes, not a leader. See, leadership from our perspective is when you intentionally make the world around you a better place with the influence that you have.
Right.
We call that often servant leadership, or helping others achieve what's within them. And so I would look at, there's people listening to this podcast today, right now, that you might have been a mechanic for years. You might be in what's traditionally called a blue collar environment. But I'm going to tell you something. Why is it that people in your industry have greater influence than others in your industry? Why is it that some get all the good assignments, or they get the privileges of others, or they have greater respect among others? It's because they've learned servant leadership without a title. In fact, I would say this: the further you are from a white collar hierarchy type leadership environment, the more important your influence, your leadership is to the world around you.
Yes.
Let me illustrate. If you don't see yourself as a leader, parent, just go home and don't lead your kids. Don't influence your kids. Every one of us. Think about the world around us if you didn't go home and lead your kids. Think about how distant your significant other would be if you don't go home and serve and lead that significant other. Leadership is all around us. The responsibility of you and I, podcast family, listener, the responsibility of ours is to see our influence as an opportunity to lead others well.
So good.
Is to do for others what you wish that they would have done for themselves, but also what you wish that you could have. So oftentimes we look at leadership and we go, oh man, I don't want to be that leader. Look at the pressure they have, the responsibility they have.
True.
I understand that leadership. I'm a senior leader, run 7 multi-million-dollar companies, and there's days that I don't want that style of leadership. But let me tell you what I always want, and so do you. I always want to be able to influence the people around me for them to achieve the greatness within them. And that's what we define as leadership.
So good. Listen, Mark, we know that not everyone leads well, right? There's people that just, they don't do it. And then we know that not everyone is led well. What do you think is the biggest gap in leadership that prevents people from receiving leadership they deserve?
Oh, that's good, Mayce.
That's a great question. So I believe the greatest gap in leadership is coachability. Now, that's a word that John Maxwell made up several years ago. His publisher told him, said, that's not a word. And John said, well, it is now. I started using it. So it's coachability. Let me explain what that means. And you guys are smiling because you've been around John Maxwell enough one-on-one that you know he literally did say that, and he really does believe that. But really what we mean by coachability is the innate passion within all of us to learn, to become something better because of something we discovered. It's curiosity.
Right.
It's walking into an environment and saying, what can I learn from this environment? I know too many people that because they sit under a bad leader, they determine that leadership is not for them. I sit under a really difficult leader one time in this environment on John's company several years ago. And I can remember for about 3 months going, I cannot believe this leader is doing this. He's violating every one of John's principles. This is not even close.
Oh, wow.
I remember this. And I went to John and I said, hey, are you aware? This is 2 decades ago, guys. This is a long time ago. I said, are you aware that so many of your principles are being violated here? And he went, okay. He didn't say yes or no. He just said, okay. And I went, how can you sit by and idly do that? He said, because that person's leadership doesn't determine my leadership.
Oh, that's good. That's a tweetable if we tweeted, Miss.
Yes, it is. Very good.
But here's what John was saying. A good leader will rise above any situation, a good situation or a bad situation, because a leader is at the front of the class. The leader is at the beginning. The leader is seeing more and before. What I took away from that meeting, John didn't say this, but I picked it up later. If I can't learn how to be a good leader under a bad leader, I'm not a very good leader. And for an entire season of almost 1.5 years, I learned more what not to do when and if I ever became the leader than I did
Right.
what to do. But in learning what not to do, when I did get the chance to become a leader, I can tell you right now today, had a conversation with John Maxwell about 3 hours ago. And in that conversation, I did something with John that I learned from watching what not to do from that leader many years ago.
Right.
Because people, I understand that many people don't have the privilege, Missy, Macy, that you and I have to be so blessed to be in the leadership environment that we're in. But that doesn't abdicate any of us from still discovering how to be the great
Sure.
leader that is within us.
So
I
good.
love the idea of, it's almost like if you talk to people that have kids, sometimes they'll say, I'm going to do the exact opposite of what my parents did, right? I'm going to raise my
Yes.
kids completely different than the way that I was raised. I love this idea that you don't have to have great leadership in order to be a great leader. In fact, you learn so much more from the opposite. So
Yeah, if you apply the lessons. If
Of
you
course.
apply the lessons you're learning, right? Okay, so
Exactly right.
so to piggyback on that, what prevents people in leadership roles then, Mark, from leading well?
Hey, bestie. We just got some amazing feedback from a client we recently worked with. Their team's morale and engagement skyrocketed after our training.
I love hearing that. Companies are seeing higher retention, lower turnover, and even increased revenue and productivity because leaders are investing in their teams.
And communication and team efficiency are improving, which we know leads to better customer service and huge cost savings. If you want these results, check out our website, Mpactful Messages, to learn how we can help you.
And for more leadership tips and strategies, sign up for our newsletter, mmleadershipnews.com.
There's three things that come to mind when you ask that, Missy. First is insecurity. I think the reason that I watch a lot of people struggle with good leadership ability is because of insecurity within them. If they truly lead with the other person's interest in mind, they're fearful that their own interest won't be protected. It's an insecurity.
Yeah.
They didn't get something at some point in their life, and so they feel like the only way they're going to get something is if they fight for it. And Zig Ziglar is the one that said this: if you'll help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want.
Yeah.
Good leaders understand that they do eat last, that they do allow others to go first. But oftentimes it's insecurity. I'm not sure if I will still be seen as the leader if I don't lead with authority, if I don't put down the iron hammer, if I don't do all of this. And all of that is rooted in an insecurity. You're not self-confident within yourself that you can be seen as the last in the room or the second place. When a leader has great security within themselves, they love to promote others around them. I think the second thing, Missy, that comes to mind when you say what causes people to not lead well, I think it's poor examples. They don't know how to lead well.
Yeah.
This is why I asked you guys beforehand, and you didn't give me a good answer. Missy asked Missy and Macy, said, Macy, how do I get people more proximity to you guys? You're not going to get John Maxwell. Chances are you might not get Mark Cole if you even wanted access to that guy without podcasts like this, but you have access and you're following Missy and Macy. And what I will tell you is they're working on a good answer to what's next for you that's listening to their podcast. And I'm going to challenge them to get a good answer on that. But a bad model is why a lot of people don't lead well. They never had a good model. I remember a friend of mine that he never told his kid that he loved him. And I went, Jim, how do you not tell your son that you love him? He went, that's weird. I went, that's not weird. It's weird that you don't do that. He said, man, I never heard my dad say, I love you. And I went, oh, okay. How'd that feel for you? He said, it felt terrible. I said, then why are you doing it to your kid?
Right.
He said, I don't know how to do it. I said, let's put it into practice. In the next 30 minutes, I want you to tell your kid you love him, and I want you to call me. And if you don't, I'm not playing golf with you tomorrow, period. Literally said this, Jim. He called me 20 minutes later, bawling. I'd never
I
heard
was
him
going to
cry.
say,
Never.
probably
Oh.
He
crying.
said, I told my son, and my 15-year-old son came and jumped in
Oh,
my arms and said, I've never heard you say that to me, Dad. He said, because I didn't know how. And he said, well, now you know how. Will you tell me again?
Oh
I
my
told him-
gosh.
He said, Mark, I didn't just tell him once. I told him twice in the same time. Here's the point that I'm making with you. Oftentimes, the reason that you're being led by somebody that's not leading well is they just don't know how. Quit
Yes.
waiting for them to learn how to lead you well and go have a conversation with them, and it'll help them lead well.
yeah.
Those of you that are listening to this
So
podcast,
good.
you don't know how to lead well, Missy and Mayce can help you. They've been in a leadership bubble for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
They know how to lead well. The third reason, so insecurity, a lack of a model. The third reason that a positional leader doesn't lead well oftentimes is because they think their agenda is more important than the people. We're seeing that in politics.
We see
right
that
now.
a lot.
Yes.
A lot.
Yes.
Politics. We're seeing that in religious leaders. It's appalling. It's nauseating. John Maxwell says it's sad.
Yeah.
And that is, people have put their agenda over the people that they're leading. And if the people you're leading is not the top of your agenda, you have a broken agenda.
Absolutely.
You have a broken agenda. John tells the story. He's a friend of mine, Dan Ryland. He was John's first executive. He was John's first Mark Cole, if you will. For those of you that know John, calling me his Mark Cole. Just John's right-hand guy. He's the operational guy. He was his implementer for all of you that use the EOS. John's the visionary. Dan was his first implementer. Dan came into the office one day and he passed by all these people. John's out there, all the people's out there, and Dan walks straight by, doesn't say hello to anybody, don't greet anybody, don't hug anybody. You know, we're huggers at Maxwell Leadership. And so just walked right past them and slammed and shut the door. And John walked back there and said, Dan, what did you just do? You walked straight through the lobby. You didn't say hello to anybody, and you got right there. And he said, John, I don't have time to say hello. I've got too much work to do today.
Oh.
John said, Dan, look out there. That's the work. That on your computer, that in your notepad, that's not your work. The people are the work.
Love that.
People don't understand that there is a responsibility in leadership that is above your organization, that is above your agenda, and that's the people that call you leader.
You know, I love that so much, Miss. I think because when we train organizations, Mark, one of the things we focus on, like ad nauseum, is for leaders to connect with their people, because without your people, you can't lead. You'll have no one to lead. So I just love that happened so that Dan could realize, no, the people are the people, and that's who I'm leading. I'm not leading the spreadsheet or the data. So that's so good. In your bio, Mark, we had said that you have the opportunity to lead organizations through economic challenges and growth barriers and different team dynamics. What would you say was one of the toughest leadership decisions you've had to make while ensuring people were led well?
Oh, this is a good
that.
one. I'm buckling up for this one.
Yeah, it is a good one. You know, I've had a few that come to mind. One was a book launch that John was doing on what really he still to this day considers to be one of his favorite books. It's kind of one of his unsung books. It's called The Intentional Living. And that particular book, I got a lot of technologists to help me launch that book. And I learned in that book launch that you can let technology drive the vision and lose the entire vision if the vision doesn't drive the technology. It's often what I refer to as one of the greatest business failures that I learned the most from.
Really? Because I don't think I ever heard that from you
No,
before.
me either.
We can go into that a little bit later if you want to, but that illustration of really coming into a moment to where you had to make a leadership decision, and right in the middle of that, it impacted a lot of people. You will remember it if I break it on down, because all of our coaches were impacted that particular year with that book launch. And I remember having to look at a group of 8 people that I had committed to go a year distance with them. And I can remember having to make the decision to stop that book launch in the way we were designing it because of the impact it was having on the masses.
Wow.
And the leadership lesson that I learned there is a friend of mine, Andy Stanley. You may have quoted him on this podcast.
Not yet, but we're going to, because
Yeah,
he
he's
has
got
one
some
that we
great ones.
love.
He's got some great quotes. One that you might want to pick up on is he says, "Do for one what you wish you could do for many."
Yes.
I found that sometimes you have to do for many what you wish you could do for one.
Mm.
And that day, I had to let some people go. I had to go back on what they said was my word, because the impact to the many that was happening, and they gave me the hardship that my decision was causing on them personally. And
Wow.
I'll never forget, because Andy Stanley's known for that quote, "Do for one what you wish you could do for many." And I went, this is one moment where I've got to do for many what I wish I could do for one.
Mm.
And so I talk about that because then coming back, probably the most recent example that I have is COVID. You guys will be a part of this one as well. I was in Israel when the world literally shut down. We were on the
Yes.
last Delta Airlines plane out of Israel back to the States, and that was only because the CEO of Delta is on our board of our nonprofit, and we had about 50 of our nonprofit members there, and we had to say, "Hey, get us home."
Right.
Thank goodness.
And so I was in Israel for a month and literally was not even aware. I was so insulated from the rest of the world that the world was literally shutting down. But I could tell there was a problem, and all of my family and friends kept saying, "Are you going to get home? Are you going to get home?" I was going, "Yeah, I'm going to get home. What are you talking about?" "Well, the world, it's bad." I'm going, "It ain't bad." And you remember the stock market in the US was going crazy, dropping, the bottom was dropping out of it. And without really understanding the real implications of that, I had to call the Marriott, where we'd had an event for 10 years before that. We were still under contract for another 4 years, 5 years. And I had to call them and say, "We're canceling this event," because they were getting ready to order $750,000 worth of food that I was going to be liable for. And they said, "Well, if you cancel now, literally you'll be responsible for the entire contract." Now, I was not in a financial position for this. We had used all of our surplus cash to make an acquisition, a purchase at the time. I did not have the $4.8 million that decision was going to cost me.
Mm.
And I made the decision not because I thought the world was shutting down. In fact, they would not let me claim force majeure, which is natural disaster, because Disney was still open when I canceled.
Gosh.
And they said, "Well, Disney's still open, so we're not going to let you claim natural disaster on this." And the reason we closed it down, and of course, John Maxwell was walking side by side with me on this. The reason we closed it down was because of all the family members of the international community. We had 48 countries that was going to be represented in IMC that year. And all the family members of those people that would have gotten to travel but not gotten home. In fact, we had a family that came over from Romania that didn't go home for 3 months. And I made that decision. That was a $4.8 million decision, money I did not have. Not because of IMC. We would have got to IMC and had a good time, because we know how to have good times at IMCs, even in the middle of COVID.
That's right.
I made the decision for the family members that would have been concerned, like my family and friends were concerned with me being out of the country. And I'll never forget looking at John and saying, "I'm making this for the friends and family that would be scared in a time that they really want their loved ones to not feel obligated to travel, but to feel responsible to stay at home." And that flows off the tongue really nicely right now. It was a hard decision.
Sure it was.
Extremely hard. It took me 3 years to pay off that decision. It was not an easy decision, but it was one of those to where you knew it was the right thing. Now, it ended up being the right thing because Disney was closed. They still didn't give me force majeure, but but still, Disney ended up closing. Everybody closed down. By the time I got home on March the 13th, everything was closed down. But when I made the decision 6 weeks before March the 13th, it was a very hard decision that proved to be true, still proved to be costly, but it proved to be true.
Yeah.
The point that I'm making there is it was the human element of that made it leadership done well. It
Yeah.
wasn't the financial decision.
Right.
Some of that hurt me. Now, I saved $750,000 by doing it that one time, but it wasn't the financial decision that made that leadership done well. It was allowing the valuing of people to come into a millions of dollar decision.
And a learn for so many people was in contracts moving forward, because I know we have it in our contract, not just a force majeure, but a pandemic clause is now in many, many contracts. If you read them close enough, you'll realize, that you can cancel.
That's right.
A pandemic.
So all of you that have that in your contract, you're welcome.
Yeah, that's great. That's right. Okay, so shifting gears a little. I mean, that was a tough leadership decision. Leaders have to make tough decisions, and you did it for the people.
For the right reason.
Right, for the right reasons. What happens when someone isn't fortunate enough to have a great leader or a great mentor like you? Where should they go? What should they do to grow themselves?
So let me say this. I feel overly fortunate in two ways that if you guys will just give me great liberty, I'll tell you those two ways. One, I'll touch on very briefly and then move on. The first way is my parents gave me an incredible foundation of faith. One that just I rely on all the time in how to treat people the way that I want to be treated. And I don't think my personality would treat people as well as I do. Now, I'm not saying I treat them well all the time. Perhaps some of your listeners would say, Mark, you got a lot of work to do. But however well I treat people, I promise you that it is because my parents gave me a great foundation of considering others through a faith vehicle. And people that don't have that, I don't know how you're such good citizens, because I wouldn't be without a foundation of faith.
I know.
The second thing that I'm extremely fortunate in that I have to acknowledge when I answer a question like this, Missy, is I've truly, John Maxwell says that success is when those that know you the most love and appreciate you the most. And I've traveled with John. Margaret Maxwell calls me the other woman because I've been with John 80% of the time. He travels for years now. And the closer I get to him, the better of a leader that he is. And that's been my mentor, not just my mentor from afar. I mean, I have been in proximity with him. And that gives me a step up, 10 steps up, a mile ahead. I don't know, some huge advantage because of what my family placed in me. And by being in proximity with John. With that being said, I still feel the responsibility, Missy, with your question, that I've got to go get mentors based on what I need. This past year, you guys have probably heard me say this, I was going through some major unhealthy decisions from a business standpoint. My business just wasn't healthy. And again, I've mentioned this, but I wasn't healthy as a leader either from really letting my faith gauge and guide my leadership. And so I went out and paid for a spiritual advisor / organizational health coach at a tune that I have never paid that much money to. It was astronomical. It was more than I made the first 4 years. In 1 year, what I paid this coach was more than I made in the first 4 or 5 years of working with John, the entire annual salary, by far.
Wow, Mark.
Wow.
Why did I do that? Because John Maxwell is not enough? No, he's not enough. Because my faith in God is not enough to guide me? No, it wasn't enough. I needed mentors to help me with a very specific need and issue. I go back and I'm calling you guys out again. Missy and Mayce has something to offer you. You need to find people that has something to offer you that is lifelong or is seasonal, and find the value of mentoring in your life. You cannot do it on your own. If you're doing it on your own, you're not attempting enough. Hands down. If you don't need help accomplishing what's going on in your life right now, you're not trying to accomplish enough.
Yeah, I love that.
I don't care what level of the workforce
that is really
you're
good.
in. I don't care how advanced you are. I don't care how successful you are and you're at the top of the food chain or the bottom of the food chain. If you don't see the need that you need to have others around you to help you, you won't be the leader that you could be without the help of others.
So good. As we wrap up, Mark, when you look back years from now, right? Years, what do you hope that your leadership legacy will be?
So, I just did a podcast just a few minutes ago, actually talking about legacy and succession. And I was first struck that I want people to talk about how I made them feel, what I caused them to believe, not what I accomplished.
Oh, Mark.
I'm blown away with what I've accomplished by being the owner of these size companies, of being the leader in a leadership brand. I'm amazed with all that. But you know what? I don't want really people to remember me from that. I want them to remember me of how I made them feel, that they were the champion. The way I said it just a moment ago, a few minutes ago, was I really want people in the idea of legacy. I want that to attach to my purpose statement. At 33 years of age, I discovered the second most important day of my life. You've heard Mark Twain's quote, 2 most important days in a person's life: the day they were born, the day they discovered why.
Right.
My day I discovered why was at age 33. And it was, I exist to motivate and inspire people to reach their full potential. I want my legacy from my daughter, my 4 grandkids, the significant people in my life, people that work alongside of me and call me boss. I want all of them to think, man, not I gave them a great bonus at the end of some year with some great accomplishment. I want them to be able to think, boy, he took me to the next gear. He inspired something within me that I didn't even know was within me. And if I can have people like that saying that kind of thing after I am done in their life, whether it's a short done or done with life, if I can have people say, he really did help me discover something within myself that made me better, then that's what legacy means to me.
And I imagine that you might be thinking the same thing, Miss, like you're living that legacy, right? Because there are people that are saying that about you right now. I don't think you have to wait until they're done or you're done for them to be able to say that about you. That's the type of leader for certain.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about leaving the earth to leave that legacy.
That's right.
Because you leave that, Mark, in every room you walk into and exit.
I agree.
With every handshake, every smile, every hug, every how are you doing, you are so filled with that passion for people that it's palpable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So then let me say this. Now let me show you my bad side. I'm greedy. I want more. I want more. I want more people to think that. I want more people to feel that. So
Sure.
I'm not done with my legacy, because you're right. Maybe 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or 100, 5,000 people would say that. Boy, I want more. I want more, because that's what it's all about.
I say every day, Mark, I'm like, and Macy too, we're like, God, use us big or use us little, but just use us in this moment. And I have to say, I can't wait to go back, Macy. I'm sure you're the same way, so that I can take notes from this and let it all sink in.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So if you only take one thing away from today's episode, let it be this. Leadership isn't about power or position. It's about responsibility. If everyone deserves to be led well, then really it starts with you. Whether you're leading a team, a family, or yourself, you have to ask, am I leading in a way that makes other people better? Because leadership is a daily choice, not a title.
Yeah. And sometimes you've got to do the check up from the neck up, right?
Yeah.
And make sure that you are in the best position mentally, spiritually, to lead others the way they deserve. And so here's an action step you can take now. Identify one person in your life. can be at home, it could be at work, it could be in the community. But think of one person who deserves better leadership from you. Maybe it's like Jim,
Missy.
right? Maybe it's like Jim, Mark's friends. But do that this week. Think of one person and think of one thing you could do to lead them well. It could be a conversation. It could be offering mentorship, encouragement, or even setting a better example. Because when you lead well, you create a ripple effect that changes everything.
Yeah, that's so good. And Mark, I know I can say this is behalf of both of us that we are just so thrilled that you said yes to joining us today. If our listeners want to stay connected with you, to kind of keep up with you and what you're doing in your leadership, where and how can they do that? And we'll put it in the show notes, but if you tell them, they saw you were the guest today. They've got their notebook out. So
that's right.
Where can they stay in touch with you?
So let me say this first, and then because I know you guys will sign off, and I want to say this before. You guys have made me probably stay up all night tonight because I got to go find another good quote that'll make y'all want to come on, ask me to come back and let's talk about it.
For sure.
You'll be
I'm going to work
offender.
on another quote where I can get back on. Let's talk about it. That's what I'm going to do. Thank you for asking that question. First of all, everything that I do is to propel the legacy of John Maxwell because he's been so good and so powerful to so many. So first of all, if you can only follow one thing, go to Maxwell Leadership. That's on social media. That's on Instagram. Just wherever your vehicle of social media is, go to Maxwell Leadership because that message with that group of people like Missy and Mayce is who is better to follow than just me. If you do want to follow me, J. Mark Cole on Instagram, Twitter, I think is the exact same thing. But mostly get in the community with me and Mayce and Missy, and let's go transform the world together by being a coach, speaker, trainer, because that's what we all want to do is just equip you to go make the best of yourself. So thanks, guys, for letting me be a part.
Yeah.
So good. Mayce, we can actually put the link if people are interested in Maxwell Leadership in the show notes as well.
Yeah, we'll do that. So we know, obviously, Mark, that one of your favorite quotes you coined, right? That was our focus today. But at the end of every episode, we do ask the leaders that join us, what is a favorite quote? So do you have another one besides everyone deserves to be well? Everyone deserves to be led well? I'm sure you do. So what's another good one that you want to share?
All right, so I'm going to give you two quick ones. The first one will be super quick.
Good.
My favorite quote ever was by my 18-month-old daughter that had never strung more than 2 words together when on Father's Day, she's 18 months old, from the back of the car, she said, "Dad, I love you so big."
Oh,
I love you so big.
I love you so big. It wasn't much. I don't love you much. I love you so big. And to this day, that's probably the favorite thing I've ever heard out of anyone's mouth.
Yes, of course.
Saying, "I love you so big." So for all of you that's looking for a quote, go tell somebody today, "I love you so big."
I love that.
My other quote is one that I love, which is anything worth doing well is worth doing with passion. I'm a passionate person. And so I do believe that if you're going to lead well, you're going to lead with passion. I do believe that passion is the fuel of making things happen with excellence. And so anything worth doing well is worth doing with passion.
We actually did an episode on passion.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And it's a value that we both live into. I mean, people and passion are right up there with some of the things that we value. But listeners, do you have a favorite leadership quote? Let us know, and we may spotlight it on a future episode.
And we'll be back next week with another quote and more leadership insights. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to talk about it.
Bye, Bestie. Bye, Mark.
Bestie.
Thank you so much. We want to thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, please show us some love by clicking the 3 dots to download the podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating on your podcast app and talk about it with other leaders to help them find the show from any of the major podcast apps. We'd love for you to follow us on social media too. Mpactful with an M _messages on Instagram and Mpactful Messages on LinkedIn.